My name is Camille. I once believed that if I did well enough, worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, then love would stay. Until one cold rainy night while I was washing dishes, my husband's phone, he was on disability benefits, played an automated voice message. "Rick, she's gonna find out Cassidy's toothbrush is missing. Hide it well." I was stunned. In the very kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals to keep this family alive. And then I found out he had been faking illness for 4 years, cheating, and waiting for the day to push me out of the house he had paid for month by month. Have you ever been made to feel like an outsider in your own life? Leave a comment if you've experienced that feeling. Hit like, subscribe to the channel to join me until the end of this journey, where I'm no longer the one bearing the burden, but the one choosing to stand up. I used to think being a wife meant carrying the weight. Silently and persistently, without complaint. That year I had turned 32 when Rick had a car accident, a collision not fatal, but enough for him to use it as a ticket to escape all responsibilities. The rehabilitation doctor said frankly, if he followed the treatment plan, he could return to work as a logistics driver within 9 months to a year. But Rick smirked, then turned to me. "I've served the military enough. Now it's time for someone to take care of me." And that someone, of course, was me. His mother, Martha, showed up not long after his first discharge. She sat down on the living room chair in my house, holding a bag of cheap cookies, looked straight at me and said clearly, "You have to understand, he's a veteran, he's sacrificed for this country. Being a wife means carrying the rest." I gripped the hot teacup tightly, my tongue burning because I dared not say anything harsher. Rick sat there, leaning against the pillow, eyes absent-minded watching TV. No word of defense. From then on, every morning I woke at 5 a.m., prepared breakfast, arranged his medication, checked his follow-up schedule, then took my daughter, Eliza, to school. Then I went to the company, where I worked as a project manager for a pharmaceutical firm specializing in arthritis and chronic pain research. A bitter irony if you think about it. I spent the workday helping people in real pain, then came home to serve a man who was only pretending. At first I still had hope. I thought, maybe he was panicking, needed time. I printed physical therapy exercises, stuck the practice schedule on the fridge, set alarms every morning to remind him to breathe deeply. I reorganized the entire kitchen cabinet so he wouldn't have to bend over. I cooked special meals, no oil, low salt, with omega-3 supplements. I cut shopping budgets, put off my dream of graduate school, poured all savings into medicine and hospital bills. And Rick? He spent hours sitting on the dark brown recliner, playing phone games, texting, and occasionally complaining because I came home late. One day I came home at 8 p.m., my raincoat still soaking, shoulders aching after 13 hours of tense meetings. I set my bag on the floor, entering the kitchen when I saw Eliza eating cold instant noodles, eyes glued to her math book. "What are you eating?" I asked, trying to keep calm. "I made it myself. Dad said Mom would be home late, then he went to bed. He said he had a headache." I turned to see Rick softly snoring on the chair. The TV was still on. On the table was an empty snack bag and a half-finished beer can. That day was Eliza's birthday. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I quietly took off my coat, pulled out a handmade bracelet I had specially ordered for her from my bag, the gift I planned to give at dinner. Elisa took it, her eyes lighting up a little, but I clearly saw something fade in them. Something that once believed her parents would always remember. In the following months, Rick sank deeper into the habit of living as a permanent victim. Whenever I mentioned therapy, he avoided it. "I don't need a doctor. I need you to believe me." Whenever I showed signs of exhaustion, Martha called, her voice sharp over the phone. "How are you taking care of him that he's getting so thin? A man can't get better if he doesn't eat well." I swallowed the bitterness many times because I bit my tongue too hard. But day by day I saw more clearly. I wasn't living in a family, but in a play. And I was playing every role, the breadwinner, the caretaker, the apologizer, and the one keeping everything from falling apart. I spent nights at the kitchen table after the kids had gone to sleep, staring at piling bills, my hands trembling from hunger yet still afraid to eat the leftover rice. I told myself, get through this winter, help Rick see the doctor again, stop Martha from interfering, but none of those things ever happened. The only thing that came was growing indifference, colder each day. Rick no longer asked how my day was. Didn't notice when I coughed for a whole week. Didn't react when I received the company's certificate of merit. When I announced I had led the R&D team to sign a 7-figure contract, he raised an eyebrow and said, good, not like it's hard work. I looked at the man who once held my hand in church, who once said in sickness and in health, and wondered, when did he disappear? Or did I never really see him clearly? I began to understand, slowly, that what I was calling my husband was actually a burden legalized by a piece of paper. But I hadn't taken action, I hadn't left yet. Like many other women, I believed maybe I hadn't tried hard enough. I was wrong. But when I realized that, I started preparing. Quietly, bit by bit, and then one day he fell into the very trap he and his mother had set. It was November and the air in Cleveland was starting to chill. The maple tree outside my office window dropped large patches of leaves, bright red and thin as paper. I often stood silently watching it for a few minutes every morning before diving into another long day of emails, spreadsheets, and endless meetings. Brandon Holloway had been my new boss for nearly 3 months. He was different from previous supervisors, not showy, not cold, nor trying to assert power. He usually started meetings with, "Did you sleep well?" before moving on to business goals. I used to think it was a new kind of small talk, but then I realized he was genuinely listening to the answer. One Friday afternoon, I was reviewing the product testing schedule for the next quarter when Brandon walked over. He gently tapped on my desk, quietly, just enough to make me look up. "Camille," he said, eyes sparkling as if smiling. "Next week the company is hosting a wellness retreat at a hot springs resort about a 2-hour drive from here. Yoga, meditation, clean eating. Things that might sound cliché but are actually quite pleasant." I was about to give a polite laugh and decline as usual, but before I could speak, Brandon placed a glossy brochure in front of me. The pictures showed a wooden cabin among pine trees, herbal steam rooms, and a slanted line of text. "Resting is also an investment in performance. The company covers everything," he added. "You can go alone or with family, but you should go. You work too hard, Camille." I didn't know how to respond. No one had ever seen me as someone who needed care. That night, after Eliza was asleep, I sat in front of the computer with the brochure and a cold cup of tea. I typed an email to register, then deleted it, then typed again, this time entering Rick's name. I thought, maybe if he got to rest, got away from that house, that recliner, and his mother's nagging, he'd want to start over. I booked a room with a soft bed, chose a lactose-free meal option like he needed, sent an email requesting the spa avoid peppermint essential oil because Rick was mildly allergic. I packed neatly, set aside supplements, labeled each box. Morning, noon, evening. Before he got into the resort car, I slipped Rick a note. "Please rest for real. Think only of yourself. You deserve it." Yeah, hope they have TV. For 3 days while he was away, I finished an entire quarterly report for the research department and spent 2 evenings sitting with Eliza doing watercolor painting. She painted a purple leaf with a smiling face and said, "Mom, you're like this leaf, small but very strong." I laughed, eyes stinging. Rick came back late Sunday afternoon, his face red from not using sunscreen. He walked in, dropped his bag on the floor, opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of orange juice and said as if throwing it, "A bunch of useless scents. Those people just like to breathe dried flower smells and call it healing." I looked at him, waiting for something. A hug? A question like, "How was your past 3 days?" Nothing. Rick went back to the recliner, turned on the TV, and when I stepped into the kitchen to cook dinner, I heard him call out like a lifeless habit. "Remember to leave the garlic out of my portion, you know that." I froze at the sink holding a bunch of wet kale. Water dripped to the floor, cold and sharp like pinpricks. What was I hoping for? Was I hoping he'd come back and suddenly want to live better? Or that he'd hug me like he did on our wedding day and say thank you? Maybe I wished the retreat could do what I hadn't managed in 5 years. I blamed myself for hoping. The next day at work, Brandon stopped by my desk and quietly asked, "Is Rick doing okay?" I didn't know how to answer. I smiled softly. He said he didn't like the lavender smell. Brandon was silent for a moment. Yeah, not everyone is ready to change, but you deserve a chance to rest. Next time there's a retreat, I hope the one who goes will be you. I said nothing, but those words stayed in my mind all afternoon. A man I had never cooked a meal for noticed the tiredness in my eyes. But the one I had given my whole life to carry? Even a thank you was too much to ask. About a week after Rick returned from the retreat, I got a new electric bill. Every month I paid on time, usually without paying close attention, but this time the number made me look twice. Nearly 40% higher than the previous month. I pulled up the online statement, checked the dates. Electricity consumption spiked suddenly during the 3 days I was away. 3 days. Rick was home alone. I tried to rationalize. Maybe he had the heater on all day, maybe he forgot to turn off the lights. But deep inside I got chills, not because of the number, but because of the feeling. Something wrong was quietly burning. A few days later, while cleaning cups to bake with Eliza, she picked up a paper cup with black handwriting, C and R with a heart symbol in the middle. Mom, who is C? Eliza asked innocently. I thought Dad's name was Rick, but Mom's name doesn't start with C. I froze for a few seconds. My throat dried as if something tiny but sharp was stuck in the middle. I reached out and took the cup. It was the kind of cup the cafe near my house used. I never wrote names like that. And I definitely don't have the habit of drawing hearts on utensils. Maybe they wrote it wrong, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Maybe someone forgot it and your dad took it by mistake. Eliza nodded and returned to the baking tray, but I felt as if I had touched something broken long ago. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room while Rick snored steadily, sorting through bills, consumption logs, and a few bus tickets stuffed loosely in his wallet. Nothing clear, but the scattered clues started to connect into a faint line. I began to pay closer attention. One Wednesday afternoon, I left work earlier than usual because an unexpected meeting was canceled. When I pushed open the door and stepped in, the first thing I smelled was perfume. Not mine. I hadn't used perfume since 2020, when I discovered I was mildly allergic to alcohol. But the smell in the living room then was something strong and sweet, like cheap vanilla mixed with amber. A scent that shouldn't be in a house where the only people besides me and my daughter were a man with chronic back pain. Did you use a new room spray? I asked, seeing Rick lying on the couch, a blanket covering half his body, eyes dull as usual. He didn't turn around, just said, "Probably someone using it in the hallway. I don't smell anything." I said nothing more. I simply went into the kitchen to start the washer and get the laundry. And then I saw it. A dark red lace underwear, the cheap kind, with the tag cut off, lying among my towels. I lingered there for a long moment, steam from the washer still warm on my face. I never bought that kind, never wore that style, and it wasn't my daughter's. It couldn't be. Eliza was only 10. I took it to the living room, placed it on the table right in front of Rick. "Whose is this?" Rick glanced, then shrugged. "Probably yours. Maybe you left it somewhere and forgot." "I don't wear lace, and definitely not that color. Are you sure?" He got annoyed and changed the TV channel with the remote. "You're making a big deal. Maybe it's from before, from a long time ago, who knows?" Rick wasn't afraid I'd find out, because he thought I wouldn't dare do anything. I was used to closing my eyes and ignoring, used to forcing myself to justify things that couldn't be justified anymore. That weekend, I went to the office of Deborah Lancaster, a woman in her 50s with bright eyes and a firm voice, not loud but enough to silence others. She sat across from me at a walnut desk, lightly flipping the first page of the file I had prepared over the last 3 weeks. Everything carefully arranged, unusual increases in utility bills, photos of suspicious changes to the interior, logs of Rick's back pain days when he still walked long distances, and copies of his most recent doctor appointments, cancelled abruptly after learning insurance required re-diagnosis. "I don't have proof of infidelity," I said slowly, "but I have enough data to prove he exploited a false health condition to collect benefits and misuse marital assets." Deborah clasped her hands, eyes without a hint of pity. "You don't need sexy photos or bedroom recordings," she said. "Under state law, financial fraud and abuse of trust are enough grounds to start an unfavorable divorce proceeding for the offender. And from what I see, you have more than enough." My palms sweat wet inside. Everything I endured, every small silent piece, was now fitting into a picture that the law could see. "Do you want to claim ownership of the house?" Deborah asked. "I'm not sure. I don't even know if I want to stay there anymore," I replied, unconsciously tightening my purse strap. "But if he plans to live there with someone else, I won't let it slide." She opened her computer and began drafting the first version of the preliminary case. When I left Deborah's office, I didn't go straight to the parking lot. I walked around the small park behind the building. The late autumn afternoon hadn't fully darkened yet, but the sunlight had dulled. The wind howled through bare branches, as if the sky was whispering something unpleasant. I opened my phone, 3 missed calls from Rick, and a single message. "Did you buy toilet paper yet?" I stared at the screen for a long moment, then turned it off. The next day at work, while I was sticking a chart on the meeting room board, Brandon walked in carrying 2 coffees from a nearby favorite cafe. He placed one beside me, eyes quietly steady, as always. "I've never seen anyone edit slides as carefully as you," he said softly. Not flattery, but genuine recognition. I smiled instead of saying thanks. Brandon looked at me briefly, then asked, as if it was casual, "Next week I have a trip to San Diego. They need someone to coordinate a new drug project for 6 months. They asked if you're interested. You can bring your daughter along. Accommodation, tuition, everything is covered." I hesitated slightly. I had heard about this project. Large budget, clear promotion opportunities, and most importantly, far away from here. "I can't yet," I said softly, like a confession. "If you change your mind, tell me any time. They haven't found a replacement yet." That entire afternoon I sat in front of the screen, but my mind was somewhere far away. The image of the small house with Eliza coloring, the lonely meals, the strange perfume in the air, and then a schoolyard somewhere in San Diego, with my daughter laughing brighter, sleeping more peacefully, studying in a classroom without Rick or Grandma bothering her. I couldn't say yes yet, but I wrote the project's start date in my planner in very small ink. Bold strokes, and growing bolder each time I came home and noticed another crack in the shell called family. I still remember that afternoon very clearly. A gloomy Saturday, drizzling rain, and Rick grumbling as he stepped out of the house to buy some beer and snacks. He didn't like me going with him at times like that, giving excuses like back pain, too many people, cars full, all kinds of reasons. But this time, I didn't object. I waited exactly 12 minutes after the door closed, then headed toward the storage room at the end of the hall, where for 3 years Rick always kept it locked. The reasons changed, sometimes too messy, don't want you to see. Sometimes old tools with grease, it's dangerous. That day I'd brought a spare key I had secretly kept since he changed the lock. The key that should have been thrown away when I bought the new lock, but I'd quietly kept it. Call it a hunch. The lock clicked so softly it gave me chills. The small room, less than 100 square feet, but the smell inside immediately made me stop. Not a musty smell, but a sweet perfume mixed with cheap lotion scent, the one I had smelled the day before. I turned on the light. The pale yellow glow revealed things that shouldn't be there. An old pink rolling suitcase tucked in a corner, topped with a mint green women's hoodie. Next to it was a size 6 pair of sneakers, 2 sizes smaller than my feet. A hanger held several bodycon dresses like those for women in their 20s, backless, sequined. And a t-shirt with large letters printed, "Cassidy's Baby." I couldn't breathe for a few seconds. My hands trembled as I reached for a file stuffed in a nearby cardboard box. The first page was a photocopy of an emergency assistance application from the state government, Rick's name but with signs of income figures being altered. The second page was a diagnosis from a private doctor, with a smudged signature, sparse content. I had worked on projects related to healthcare benefits. I recognized immediately. This was a fake file. At the bottom of the box was a stack of photos. Photos of Rick and a young woman, light blonde hair, a flower tattoo on her wrist, hugging in my kitchen. Behind them was the refrigerator where I had posted pictures of Eliza. Another photo, both lounging on the recliner. The chair, Rick once said, I can't lie on because of back pain. She grinned widely, arm around his neck, while Rick's hand held the TV remote. Another photo, the two of them standing in my bedroom in front of the mirror, Rick wearing my shirt making a heart shape with his hands. I put down the photos, trying to steady my shaking hands as I took the last document. A proposed transaction, titled, Temporary Transfer of Ownership Camel Parish to Richard Parish. With a note, Camille agrees to sign a power of attorney for Richard to handle the house sale due to unstable mental health. The bottom right was Rick's signature. Below that, blank. For me. I collapsed onto the cold wooden floor. It felt like I was seeing exactly how I was being cut out of this life. By a plan. By a pen stroke. By a man who once swore he would never betray. I heard the front door open outside, Rick's footsteps dragging, the rustling of a plastic bag. I stood up slowly, put everything back in place, locked the storage room door and returned to the kitchen as if I had never left. Rick dropped the bag on the table, pulled out a cold beer can. The supermarket was packed, he said, opening the can as if talking about the weather. I had to wait almost 20 minutes. Must have been tiring. Yeah, bad back pain. Tomorrow I'll lie down all day, no work. I smiled. It was the first time I was sure. I was living with a man who could stage a 4-year-long performance to legally and smoothly push me out of his life. I had prepared the divorce paperwork. Now I knew I needed to prepare something else, a strategy. And if he planned to build the stage, I would let him perform, until he was the one who fell from his own role. The day I decided to leave, I woke at dawn. Eliza was still sound asleep, chubby under a pale pink blanket. I remained by the window, gazing out at the small garden where she usually played before school. The sky wasn't fully bright yet, but the faint light was enough for me to feel this was a beginning. I took out the old wooden jewelry box, opened it, and pulled out a white envelope I had prepared the day before. Inside were the divorce papers, a detailed list of expenses Rick must repay, from electric and water bills to the fake medical invoices I had collected. I carefully placed a USB, containing fabricated evidence I had prepared as a warning, in case he tried to sue or cause trouble. Next to the envelope I left a small note that read, I do not intend to argue any further. Everything will be settled in court. This is my choice and the last time we will meet. I placed the envelope on the kitchen table right by the door. The faint scent of coffee lingered softly from the machine, a remnant of the night before. Eliza woke up, eyes still sleepy. I bent down, hugged her, and whispered, Mommy is going to take you to a new place where I believe you will be happier. She smiled without asking more. I called the school in San Diego where Brandon had connected me earlier. I enrolled Eliza, arranged all the necessary documents, from academic records to health papers. Next, I withdrew money from my personal account. This was savings from the years I worked extra hours, from refusing to shop for myself to save for my daughter. I booked plane tickets and reserved seats for the two of us. All unfolding quietly, like the decision I had made. Rick called a few times, but I didn't answer. I filtered his messages. I didn't want any conversation that might make me hesitate. The day we left, it was lightly raining. I carried my suitcase, looking through the window at the house I had been attached to for so many years. No farewell. No lingering glance. Eliza held my hand tightly as we stepped into the taxi. When we boarded the plane, I looked down, watching the house shrink and disappear into the clouds. I thought of Rick. Of the coldness he showed me, of the woman named Cassidy I had seen in that secret room. Where was he now? With whom? Did he think of us? But in that moment, the only thing I felt was relief. As light as the first time in many years, I didn't have to pretend to be strong for anyone else. I knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew there would be battles to fight. But at least now, I could choose to walk my own path. My story was not over, it was beginning. From a distant place where Eliza and I could start writing new chapters of our lives. And while Rick and Cassidy sat in a tattoo parlor laughing happily, they didn't know that we had left. Not in tears, but in silent determination. The San Diego morning sunlight wasn't harsh like in Cleveland. It was gentle and bright in a way that made you want to open your heart. Eliza and I had moved into a small apartment near the beach, where each morning the sound of waves reminded me of a different life, a new opportunity. The apartment wasn't large, but to me, it was a whole world. I arranged a study corner for Eliza, with watercolors, drawing paper, and her favorite books. Every afternoon, she eagerly showed me new paintings from her art class after school, her smile brighter than the sunshine outside. As for me, the job at the new branch was also a challenge. The arthritis drug research project was in its final stages, and I was assigned as the main coordinator. The work environment was different. No suffocating pressure, but support and sharing. Colleagues here didn't see me as just a task-bearing machine, but as a friend, a leader. Brandon still kept in touch regularly, but without pressure or over-inquiry. He respected my privacy, knowing everyone needs their own space to heal. One Friday afternoon, as the sun began to cast golden hues over the sky, Brandon invited me for a walk along the beach. He didn't urge, he simply asked, gently, "When you're ready, let me have the honor of taking you for a walk." I smiled, feeling for the first time complete recognition, not as a wife, a mother, or a burden, but as myself, with all my imperfections and unique beauty. Walking on the cool sand, sea breeze blowing through my hair, I no longer felt tired or bound by invisible burdens. I was simply me. Eliza, beside me, ran and played with neighborhood children, reminding me of a childhood I never had, a childhood of freedom and true joy. That afternoon, as the sun began to fade its last weak rays, my phone rang. The screen showed Rick's name, and a complex, indescribable feeling rose inside me. I stood still for a moment, fingers trembling over the answer button, wondering if I was strong enough to hear what he had to say after months of silence. Months I had healed on my own without him. Finally, I pressed answer. Rick's sigh came through the line, his voice trembling, far from the cold, indifferent tone I once knew. "Camille, my mom kicked me out. Cassidy left too. They're revoking my disability benefits. I don't know what to do anymore." I looked over to the next room where Eliza was focused on coloring the pictures she drew for school. Her eyes were clear, without worry, fully trusting her mom. My heart ached, but I tried to stay calm, replying with the voice I had trained for years. "Are you okay?" He sighed, his tone deepening with disappointment and despair. "I was deceived, Camille. I was used. I need you. You're stronger than you think." I heard in those words not just a late apology but an admission of failure, not just in saving the marriage, but in saving himself. Yet at the same time I sensed a lingering irresponsibility hidden in his words, as if the mistakes and wounds he caused were not his fault, but an unfortunate disaster I had to endure. I answered gently but firmly, "You don't need me, Rick. You need someone to bear all the consequences for you, but I won't do that anymore." There was silence on the other end. It seemed he wanted to say more, to beg or find a reason to hold on, but in the end he was quiet, and I decided to hang up. That moment didn't bring fierce anger or tears of sorrow. Instead, it was a peaceful, meaningful ending, the end of weary years, endurance, and blind hope. I looked at Eliza, still sitting beside me drawing, her eyes pure and trusting, the greatest strength for me to keep moving forward on the long road ahead. I knew from that second this was no longer just my story. It was a journey for me and my daughter to live truthfully, free from the past, free from those who didn't deserve us. In the days that followed, I received no more calls from Rick. His mother didn't contact me either, and Cassidy completely disappeared from my life. No explanations, no pleas. One night, after Eliza had fallen into deep sleep, I sat alone on the balcony of our small San Diego apartment, silently watching distant stars in the sky. I silently thanked myself for having the courage to leave, to live for myself and my child. I understood that this silence was true strength, silence to not allow myself to be pulled back into old pains, silence to listen to myself and rediscover life from the simplest things. That last call was not the end of everything, but the beginning of a new chapter in my life, a chapter of freedom, hope, and healing. I once thought that as long as I sacrificed enough and loved enough, things would change. But now I know that loving myself is the most important thing. The evening on the San Diego beach lacked the noisy bustle of the city, nor was it crowded as I once imagined. Only the gentle crashing of waves, mingling with the soft breeze through the grass, creating a tender melody just enough for my soul to relax after months of tension and heartbreak. Eliza ran up to me, eyes sparkling as she saw me genuinely smile. "Mom, you're really smiling," she exclaimed innocently. "Before, you only pursed your lips. You were always serious and stressed." I held her hand, my eyes warm. "I've learned to smile again, my love," I said, "so I don't have to hide my feelings or pretend to be strong every day anymore." Eliza leaned on my shoulder, grinning with eyes squeezed shut. No more words needed. That was the first time in a long while I saw my daughter so happy and peaceful. The sea breeze swept away all fatigue. I felt more deeply than ever the freedom I now had. I didn't have to live in the shadows of a broken marriage anymore, nor carry the blame, betrayals, and indifference. I was free to be myself, with all my flaws, scars, and passionate desires. Brandon was beside me, gently holding my hand. He didn't need many words. Silently by my side, a peaceful support I had longed for. No pressure or expectations, only a quiet presence that reassured me I wasn't alone. I remembered the past days when I thought love meant endurance, sacrifice to exhaustion, accepting pain and loneliness. I thought leaving would be failure, weakness, unforgivable. But now looking back, I know I was wrong. Leaving is not failure, but survival. Loving yourself is the bravest step in life. I won't let anyone choose me as a scapegoat for blame, excuse, or corruption. I don't want my daughter to grow up believing love means suffering and sacrifice, without ever being reciprocated. I'm done fearing judgmental eyes and gossip from society or family, because I know my worth, the value of freedom and happiness. Together we walked along the shore, leaving footprints in the soft sand. Eliza ran and played like the innocent child I always wished for. Brandon gently placed his hand on my shoulder, and I felt his warmth, like a promise that I no longer had to be alone. I smiled, looking up at the starry sky. I don't know what the future holds, but I believe I have chosen the right path, the path I choose for myself and my daughter. I know I'm not perfect, but I am the most authentic and courageous version of myself. I will never let old pains drag me down, or let anyone destroy what I am building. And above all, I will be the mother my daughter deserves, a mother who teaches her to love herself, to stand up and to live truly. My story is not just mine. It is the voice of countless women who have suffered and sacrificed without being seen. I share this story not only to tell my journey, but also to send a message. Be brave enough to love yourself and believe happiness and freedom are everyone's right. What do you think about the choices I've made? Have you ever experienced or witnessed similar stories in life? Please leave a comment below. I want to hear your stories so we can share and empathize together. If you find this story meaningful, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss real, deep, and inspiring stories about family life, love, and growth coming next. Every story is a journey, and I look forward to accompanying you in the new chapters ahead. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next videos.